Do or do not. There is no try. Today's quilt is called That Yoda Guy. Stick with me and I'll teach you why. Let's get stitching. Well, welcome back everybody to another fantastic tutorial. My name is Rob Appell and I'm a quilt maker at Stitchin Heaven. You are joining us on our YouTube channel right here. We call the show So Well and I'm super hope you're subscribed. If you have not already, do so please. And today it's a kind of a New Year style quilting tutorial. I really want to focus on a super fun and simple project that's a skill builder, but maybe not for you, but for the other folks in your life. This is always a wonderful time where we meet a bunch of new quilters, so I'm going to encourage all of you skilled quilters to use this project or a project very similar to encourage others to learn how to quilt. So I'm going to walk you through all the steps here, but I promised you I would tell you how this fun quilt got its name, the Yoda Guy. If you're not aware, Stitchin Heaven does a ton of wonderful quilt cruises every year. And one year on the island of St. Martin, Deb wandered into That Yoda Guy museum and met an awesome gentleman, was very inspired. And so when you're on St. Martin with us at Stitchin Heaven, make sure you go to That Yoda Guy museum. And that's kind of where the name for the quilt came from. But if you know Master Yoda himself, his favorite saying is do or do not. There is no try. And so in quilting, we try a lot of things, but what we really are is doing constantly. We're learning, we're skill building. And so this again is a quilt that I'd like to encourage all of you to share with some of your friends. And I even have a quilt kit. I'll be right back. In case you want to just go ahead and treat somebody to this awesome project. It has the pattern and it has a bunch of beautiful batiks in it. So we're going to go ahead and work through the theory in this quilt using the exact same instructions to build block after block. And like I said, it's a super fun project and we're going to use basically all batiks. And batiks are very friendly for sewing with if you're a new quilter. They've got a little bit more stability. They don't really have a wrong side. So a lot of the tips I'm going to teach you today, I'd like you to share with your new quilting friends as well. So batiks are fabulous fabrics to start with because they're easier to handle, they actually stitch and press better, and there really isn't a wrong side, so we're omitting potential mistakes for our new friends. Now in this particular project, you're going to need equal parts of your dark and light reading batiks, and we're going to discuss this square right here in a little bit. Is it a light, is it a dark, and how do we handle it? You're going to have 5-inch strips, and like I said, equal apart. So you need 7 dark and 7 light 5-inch strips. Those are going to be subcut down into these squares. There is 54 squares from each, the light and the dark. Hope that makes sense. Twice as many for the 4.5-inch strips. So you're going to need 12 strips to yield yourself 108 4.5-inch squares from your darks and 4.5-inch squares from your lights, so that you have the opportunity to put these all together. And most of our sewing today, or most of our education today, is going to be working from our 5-inch strips, which again have been subcut down into 5-inch squares. So let me go ahead and just kind of tidy up a little bit and discuss what we're going to do next, which is make these units here in which we call the half square triangle. We're going to be combining our light fabrics with our dark fabrics. And back to this one, I chose it as a light because it's a random, it's a patchwork. I mean, this is what you're building here with all of this wonderful little color exchange, right? So I wanted to bring in an extra dark piece just so we could kind of discuss what do we do with it. And that is the one we're going to sew for our first series of half square triangles. So to make the half square triangle, you need to draw a diagonal line with a chalk pencil or a friction pen. Those will erase with ironing from corner to corner by laying a ruler on top and just drawing it. But when it comes to this dark-ish light version of the fabric, what you're going to notice is that I'm going to marry it with my darkest fabric available, and that way when it becomes one of these half square triangles, it will obviously tell us which side is the dark and which side is the light, because that will be the end goal in building our square, is divided into half with a patchwork half square triangle that will give us the opportunity to build from our center out on that Yoda Guy quilt. Okay, hopefully that's making some sense. So Back to our half square triangle construction, we're going to go ahead and use this as a guiding line, not a stitching line. So as you come over to a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to put that foot down, and I actually like to kind of sew a little closer to the line. I'm going to teach you all how to trim and square, and this is really going to be important for the accuracy of our new quilters. We want their blocks to show up beautiful, so I'm just stitching kind of a little less than 1/4 inch from that chalk line. And of course you can do this in the format we call chain piecing, which would be line after line after line, all one side, and then trim your blocks, rotate them, and do the second side. But for right now, and especially if you're teaching a new quilter, have them do 3, 4, 5 squares individually, so they're focused on the sewing, and then introduce them to chain piecing, right? So then start to have them do 2 or 3. You could be organizing the fabrics for them and handing them to them. So remember, you're feeding our new quilters in our baby steps, right? That's what we want to do. And if you are a new quilter out there, hopefully you're really enjoying our Learn to Quilt format series. And I'd really like to know how I can continue to serve you all better with other Learning to Quilt style videos. So something that's real important to me. Okay, now we're going to introduce a couple of tools which just make life easy and efficient and also a little safer. So I'm going to bring in a rotating mat. It's basically like a lazy Susan, an efficient Susan with a rotating cutting mat on top of it. Now the first thing we need to do is have a ruler that is larger than our square in all directions, that also has this wonderful diagonal line on it. I'm going to teach you how to trim the old-fashioned way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lay this ruler right along that chalk line, so that we can then safely cut apart our 2 half square triangles to be. Okay? The next thing we're going to need to do for this method is we're going to go ahead and press them to the dark side, and that looks like this. Hold your dark fabric up in the air, take your iron, if it's hot, and then go ahead and slide it or lie it on top of this square like this for a second. The wool mats also really help with that heat transfer. And one of the reasons we always say is press to the dark side, folks, if again, brand new quilting out there, is we don't really want that seam to show through. In some blocks, it's just going to happen. So maybe you can see where that seam shows through. And in other blocks, we can try to avoid it. So that's what we're looking at when we're talking about pressing to the dark side. And now we need to go ahead and trim this half square triangle unit down. Let me press that a little bit better. Iron wasn't real hot. And fabric does have memory, so if I leave it here to cool a little bit longer, that will help. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to find this diagonal line on this, and mathematically, let's stop and talk about this. We started with 5-inch squares. We stitched 2 of them together technically to yield up this half square triangle unit. The pieces we're going to join these half square triangle units are 4.5 inches. That's why you made your 4.5 inch strips as well, and you made twice as many. Hopefully this is really starting to make sense now in a very basic engineering format. So we need to trim these down to 4.5 so they fit back into our standard patchwork. And the best way to do that is to line up our diagonal line right here in our seam allowance and make sure that we have more than 4.5 inches of block still underneath. And I like to cut here, I like to cut here, and what that has done is it's dog-eared one of the corners and it's trimmed off 2 sides. Now the easiest way to do this is to just slide this down this way on this particular ruler, and then you find your math that it's going to be a 4.5 by 4.5 corner. Rotate the cutting mat so you're safe, and then go ahead and slice across here once. And sometimes I like to slice backwards so that I'm not pushing my tip of my blade right into the corner of my tool. That can actually dull the blade. And folks, if you've never seen it where you cut and there's a thread and then a thread and then a thread, that's the sign of a dull blade. Definitely time to replace them. And we always have a great deal on rotary blades, 45mm rotary blades here at Stitchin Heaven, and they're very good blades. Okay, so this is what we're going for. We're going for this trim down that is a 4.5 inch unit, so it fits back in now, and technically we have enough to move into the rest of the block construction, so let's do that together. Safety first, folks. If you didn't catch this, if you're a new quilter, always close your rotary cutter blades. You never want to bump into one of those. They're incredibly sharp, efficient, and or dangerous. So let's be careful with what we're doing there. Now, in order to build this, and we're going to use this one as well, we now need to make, and we're going to kind of pile the dark into our lap and push the light up into the sky away from us. And our triangles are going to run in the same formula. So we're just going to rotate it so we have 1, 2, and then let's grab a third. And I usually like to use some different colors, different fabrics, I should say, not colors. We're using tones today. So do you see that? Now I've got 3 of these triangles laying across here. Then we're going to fill in with our squares down here. And again, what I wouldn't want to do is put this dark right up against there, because then that's going to show a different unit. So I could put it here, but I'm going to probably leave that out altogether. And let's go ahead. Oh, I like the way that brown touches though. And now I'm just kind of going through my stash here of my scraps, and I've built out a random scrappy dark side to my block. Okay, so then I'm going to come in here and grab the light sides, and let's go with this one here. We'll put this one up here. I have a little less variety in my lights of the scraps I was cutting because I had a big chunk I started to use. But I think you can now see that. I know there's a lot of light going on in the room to help me look better on camera, is the truth, really. But it might be washing out some of the cute little speckles in these. These are all batiks again. But now you can see what's happened. You can see that there's a light side, a dark side. And as we bring these squares together, I think it's going to really start to make more sense. If you are concerned, however, about any of these fabrics being too dark for your lights or too light for your darks, omit them. You can make one square and decide you don't care for it in the unit and just cut other fabrics. It's no problem. Of course, if you have the kit from us, they've been labeled and designated so that they'll really work nicely. But like I said, I was working from my stash this morning. Okay, so now technically we have what is considered a 9-patch block. We're going to sew these together. And what I usually just do is marry them up 2 by 2. So let's start with a really easy one, which are these straight edges. I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance guide on my presser foot. So when I drop this down, they all should be staying accurate. That's one of the real keys, folks, is just trying to keep a consistent seam allowance if you're new to quilting. So this one here, I'm going to go ahead and join and this is a thing I can point out so you make sure you're staying on target. Look, folks, I'm always going to be joining the darks to the darks and the lights to the lights when it comes to these triangles. So that might help you not get accidentally rotated. And then we're just going to go ahead and stitch through here. And then up in here, noticing that I'm leaving everything in play on my actual design wall or on my cutting mat next to the machine so that it's very easy to return to my organized spot. I find that's actually one of the keys to not having to get out that old seam ripper. And as much as I want you teaching our friends how to do quilting, I don't really think you should be having to teach them how to seam rip. I mean, it is a skill we all have, but all right. So now again, over here, I'm just going to start to press in one direction this way. But now this was my bottom row. So I've now effectively pressed into the center. Okay, so then this one we decided was my center, so I'm going to press away from my center. We're going to talk about seam nesting here in a moment. And this is the key to that, is knowing which directions we're going to be sewing, and I'm pretty confident the instructions help us with that as well. So again, I press this seam right here this way, away from center, and then this block up here, okay, this is that top corner, so I'm pressing into center. And the nice thing about this is I actually am pressing from the half square triangle units at the moment into the square units, and that's actually just a little easier on the fabric to go ahead and bend over that way. Okay, so now we just need to go ahead and consistently sew the right pieces. So again, block by block, and I always like to have the heavier pieces of fabric or the more fabric on the feed dogs, the bottom of the machine. So I did rotate this so I could have the single block on top of the 2 blocks. I believe that's very helpful. But still, even though I'm kind of chain piecing here, I'm keeping them in order as I go. And if you're, again, standing or sitting next to a person that's just learning to quilt, you may be wanting to feed them each block at a time and just watching to make sure that they're getting the seam going in the correct direction, because if you can have a really successful first day of quilt making with a person, you can really turn them loose from that point. If you can give them some of these instructions, and then again, encourage them to remain subscribed here to our channel, and we'll keep giving you great step-by-step information. Now, if you've gotten lost to which way you're pressing, go ahead and just watch your seams and keep pressing in that same direction. Okay, so I'm going to press this way. Lights are in the top, so that was our top row. Seam going this way now. So I'm going to press this direction. And the lights, just watching, remember, lights are sewing to lights, darks are sewing to darks. And by doing that, folks, watch what's happened. Now when I flip this over and this over, you can see the seam allowance are doing this, and that's what is called nesting seams. We're going to be able to use that to position, kind of lock the threads together while we go to the machine. And by doing that, that helps us get these points to show up pretty crisp. Okay, so that's the next thing we can teach our new quilt makers. Let's double check this one right now. We're pressing this way, so we're going to keep pressing this way. And that kind of contradicts what I said earlier. Now we're pressing into the half square triangle, but all of the seams are going in one direction. And that'll come back in here. Double check, lights, darks. Now we're just going to go ahead and join the rows. And again, by nesting those seams, I'm able to flip them over, and I kind of lock and wiggle the threads next to each other, lining up this first corner here and heading on into the presser foot. Still that same exact 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then once I cross the first seam, I take a moment, pause, line up the second seam. Now my finger was on that. Once I cross that, I'm going to line up the bottom corner. Of course, you could do this with safety pin, or excuse me, straight pins for your new quilter, but if you can teach them to use their fingers and be efficient this way, I truly believe it makes the quilting a little less daunting and more fun. Now, my friend Tiffany Hayes is obsessed about precision, and she really likes to use all of the little tricks, pressing seams open and pinning every union and all of that kind of stuff. Now, she really likes that, but I don't know if she knew she liked that on day one. So I'm going to encourage you to be a little bit carefree at first, working towards that, more precise. Okay, we got to put on our last row here real quick. Same thing, matching up the front corners, matching up those seam allowances. Matching up the next seam allowances. As I cross over there, matching up the bottom corner. Okay, and terrific. Let's go ahead and press this block now so that we can talk about the series of construction that's going to happen. Of course, you're following along on your pattern, or if you're following this video, it is quite simple. I don't know how many blocks I should have told you to make. I guess I could figure it out fairly quick. But I can tell you that by looking at this center here, it's really cool. We're going to build the middle of the quilt out. Let me just show you this again here on the overhead camera. So you can see, and really this here is one of those block units. This is going to form this square on point here. So let's go ahead and do that now as we come together, and you're going to see that as I bring, okay, remember you're making all of these units that look identical, but as this rotates here, you can see that's going to form that diamond. Now, did you just see what I just saw, however? Look, I have 1 and 2 pieces that are looking the same. So I wouldn't want to put that one there. Let's see what happens if I come over here. Oh, much better. Okay, folks, so again, you're going to be building a huge variety of these blocks. make sure you take the time to do your best on the design wall before you just jump in and start sewing the blocks together 2 by 2. Make sure that you lay them out so that you have a nice variety of the different colors of fabrics touching. Because don't forget, where we have the darks now touching here, the next row will bring the light blocks together. Right? They'll be running like this, okay? Because this will start to form out that next outer row. You can see once we start to get the variety of these extra dark lights in here that it will most likely work, because they're going to start to show up all about the quilt, adding some character. And of course, I am going to quilt this with a darker thread, probably a nice variegated brown, so that when I quilt into the light fabric, it even starts to show up more with the tones of the browns. But do make sure you're watching out that you don't have too many like fabrics touching. Remember, that was about to happen here, just like this, and we definitely don't want that. But a quick rotation here has gotten us a nice variety, and isn't that the coolest thing about quilt making? So really glad you were able to join me today for another awesome video here at Stitchin Heaven's YouTube channel. Please make sure you are showing quilting and sharing the love of textiles with your friends out there. I can almost guarantee there's somebody in your neighborhood that would love to learn from you. Feel free to rely on us as a resource. Grab yourself a kit, set up a little tea party, and hang out with one of those friends and teach them what you love so much about quilt making. We're going to grow that whole community together and allow us here at Stitchin Heaven to continue to serve. Like I said in the beginning of the video, please let me know what other things you would like to learn by putting it in the comments below. What can we help teach all of you brand new quilters out there? What are you dying to find out? And we'll do our best to answer those. We also have a live video series on Friday afternoons. You can check those out and ask questions in person. And like I said, please make sure you are subscribed and following along and checking out all of our different playlists. Folks, thanks again for being here. Until I see you again, please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.